Another kind of so-called paranormal occurrence precognitive dreams, where people dream about things that haven't yet happened. And animals, I think, have similar premonitions, which are shown by their ability to detect earthquakes and tsunamis in advance. I've been studying earthquakes and tsunamis for the last 25 years and documenting animal responses. And in almost all cases, animals have been responding hours or days before the disaster strikes, long before any of the official scientific warning systems could pick up what's going to happen. And in China, in the 1970s, they actually used this systematically to give earthquake warnings by getting large numbers of people to observe animals and evacuated whole cities on the basis of animal warnings, saving hundreds of thousands of lives. I think earthquake warning systems could be set up today. Almost everyone has mobile phones now all over the world. And if they were told what to look for, which is basically anxious or unusual behavior in pets or wild animals, and if all the data was sent in to a central phone number or website, it would be possible to see if there was a surge of reports from a particular region, which could give an advance warning of earthquakes. It could save a lot of lives. It would cost very little. It would involve lots of people in participatory citizen science. Yet I've been trying to persuade earthquake warning people to do this for 20 years now, but none of them will do it. They just say, oh, it's just superstition and it's all make-believe. It's not scientific. Well, actually, it is. There's now been enough studies, including studies of the behaviour of amphibians in Italy before and during and after earthquakes, scientifically documented, showing that they really do seem to pick up in advance when earthquakes are going to happen. I don't have time to go into all the different kinds of psychic phenomena, but these really are what I call mysteries of everyday life. They happen all the time. The sense of being stared at, as I've already discussed, telephone telepathy, mother-baby telepathy, dogs that know when their owners are coming home. These are not weird phenomena that occur only in specialist fortune tellers looking into crystal balls and things. These are normal things that happen to normal people, including children, as part of everyday life. They're known all over the world, and in most cultures they're taken for granted, and people actually cultivate these abilities because they're useful. In our society, they're denied, they're ridiculed. People who have them don't want to talk about them in public because they're afraid they'll be attacked for being superstitious or stupid. And so-called skeptics put a lot of effort into denying them. There are skeptic organizations like the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. There are skeptic magazines like the British magazine The Skeptic. And there are skeptic activist groups on Wikipedia that seek to edit anything to do with psychic phenomena, people who do research on them, and any other unusual phenomena, portraying them as pseudo-scientific, irrational, and nonsense. In fact, on Wikipedia, these editors have defined parapsychology as a pseudoscience, and therefore everything to do with it, and everyone who does research that might be connected with parapsychology, including me, is defined as a pseudoscientist. And there's a relentless attack in Wikipedia, backed by one of its founders, Jimmy Wales, who's an extreme dogmatic skeptic who encourages this biased editing, to keep in place this denialist movement, which has an enormous influence on the media, the serious media, and on the educational system, and makes people shut up about these experiences because they know they'll be attacked. I myself have inevitably had many encounters with skeptics as a result of my research in these areas. And what's been so striking is that most of these skeptics know nothing whatever about the evidence. For example, I was invited to take part in a debate at the European Skeptics Congress in Brussels several years ago on telepathy. On the way there, I met a friendly skeptic in Ghent, where I was giving a talk, who warned me not to go. He said, "Don't go, you're walking into a trap. They're planning to destroy you." And when I got there were 600 skeptics from all over Europe, all paid-up members of skeptic activist groups. And I had this debate with the head of the Dutch skeptic movement, who was called Jan Nienhuis, the head of Stichting Skepsis, the Dutch skeptical organization. He had half an hour to speak about telepathy. I had half an hour. He went first, and he spent half an hour proving it was impossible according to the second law of thermodynamics and established principles of physics. I then spent half an hour summarizing evidence from my own and other people's experiments. And after that, he then said, "The fact you're claiming that there are all these highly significant results just proves your experiments must be badly flawed." And I said, "Well, in that case, would you care to point out what the flaws are?" He said, "You don't think I waste my time reading this stuff?" He said, "I don't need to read it. I know it's flawed." So, in other words, he actually said publicly that his opinion was evidence-free and he had no need to look at the evidence and hadn't looked at it. And that caused a kind of division among the skeptics. Some of them actually sided with me and thought that skepticism ought to involve at least pretending to look at the evidence rather than simply denying it. Others sided with him, and the Congress actually broke up into a whole lot of discussions, and rather heated discussions. And I was not destroyed and was able to, some of them actually came up to me afterwards and apologized and said that this was, they thought I was doing the right thing in doing actual experiments. I've also had a public debate on telepathy with the Professor Lewis Wolpert in London at the Royal Society of Arts. And again, he had no knowledge whatever of any of the evidence. And when I showed films of experiments, all the audience could see them, but he was sitting in front of the screen, tapping a pencil on the desk, looking bored and sighing, without even turning round to look at the evidence, even when it was going on in the very same room. And again, that didn't make a very good impression on the audience, and I think revealed just how dogmatic this kind of denialism is. I've also had encounters with Richard Dawkins and a number of other skeptics, which have made it clear that they're simply not interested in the evidence. They don't want to know, because they're convinced, without looking at it, it must all be flawed, because they so strongly believe in their dogmatic materialist worldview. It's like a kind of fundamentalist faith that they have, which I think has no role in science, really. I think science should be about the open-minded inquiry into the way things are, not a belief system. And the whole point of this series is that science has become a kind of dogmatic belief system for many people. Most people don't actually believe it very strongly. They just go along with it because it's what they're taught at school and they don't want to get into trouble or cause problems for themselves. But there are a hard core of people who very seriously believe in it, or almost fanatical in their belief and in their bigotry. Well, you can reflect on your own experience about these phenomena, and it's very likely you would have had experiences of your own. And I'll just end, as usual, with the questions for materialists. The first question for materialists: if you think telepathy and precognition are theoretically impossible or very improbable, can you explain why? If they think they're impossible or improbable, basically the only way they can explain it is by just in terms of restating the materialist dogma. It's not based on evidence, it's based on a theoretical presupposition. Second, have you ever looked at the evidence for psychic phenomena? If so, can you summarize it and explain what's wrong with it? Most of them haven't looked at it, and if they summarize it at all, I've often, when I've asked people to do this, they say, "Oh, when I was a student 30 years ago, I read a report in Scientific American about some card experiments that didn't really show much and they might have been fraudulent, and I just dismissed the whole phenomenon." Not really a very adequate summary of thousands and thousands of experiments over decades of research. So I think anyone who's claiming to have a scientific opinion on this really needs to have looked at the evidence. Have you yourself ever had a seemingly telepathic experience? The chances are that most people will have done. The statistics show that most people have had experiences with telephone telepathy, and many have had other kinds of telepathic experience as well. And finally, what might persuade you to change your mind? Really, for someone who's a hardcore materialist, almost nothing would persuade them to change their mind, even their own experience. In fact, many of them already had experiences of telephone telepathy, but then they just dismiss it as chance coincidence. So here we have something which is on the very front lines of the paradigm shift of a conflict between worldviews, one which sees the minds as expanded, extended, not confined to brains, reaching out, interconnecting us with the environment, with other people with whom we're bonded, with animals to whom we're bonded, connecting with our own future through precognitive dreams or intuitions or premonitions, which doesn't happen all the time, obviously. We, of course, connect with our past through memory. But all of these are ways in which our minds are extended beyond the present activity inside our heads. And when we move into a worldview where we can see that our minds are extended, so many more phenomena make sense. So many phenomena in our own lives make sense. And we can let go of having to deny a large part of our own experience in favor of a theory which is so inadequate at explaining anything to do with consciousness, and which has got itself tied up in so much unscientific and irrational denialism. So think about your own experiences, discuss them with your friends, ask them about their own experiences, and I think you'll find just life is much fuller and richer when you can accept these things really happen. They're just part of life. They're natural, not supernatural, normal, not paranormal.
Find out more on advire.life.